During the Second World War, several massacres were carried out by Axis collaborators and pro-Nazi forces using crude and brutal methods, including knives, axes, and farm tools. One of the most infamous examples was the Jedwabne massacre in German-occupied Poland on July 10, 1941. After the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, German authorities encouraged and at times directed anti-Jewish violence in newly occupied territories. In Jedwabne, a small town in northeastern Poland, local pro-Nazi collaborators rounded up the Jewish population, around 1,000 men, women, and children. Eyewitness accounts and later investigations revealed that victims were beaten, tortured, and murdered using axes, knives, and clubs. Many were burned alive after being forced into a barn that was set on fire. The massacre was part of a broader wave of violence in 1941, where Axis forces and local collaborators sought to eradicate Jewish communities through terror and mass killings, even before the establishment of large extermination camps. While German security police orchestrated much of the atmosphere of fear, many of the atrocities were carried out directly by locals motivated by a mixture of Nazi propaganda, long-standing anti-Semitism, and opportunism. The Jedwabne atrocity remained a subject of silence and distortion for decades during the post-war communist era in Poland, where the full role of local collaborators was downplayed. In the early 2000s, renewed historical research, survivor testimonies, and official investigations confirmed the scale and cruelty of the massacre. Roughly 1,000 Jews, almost the entire Jewish community of Jedwabne, were wiped out in a single day through methods that relied not on industrial killing machines but on raw, brutal violence with farm tools and fire. This massacre stands as a chilling reminder that genocide during the Holocaust was not limited to gas chambers and firing squads. It also included intimate, close-range killings in villages and towns, where ordinary people, armed with knives, axes, and hatred, slaughtered their neighbors under the influence of Nazi ideology. Another horrific series of massacres with axes and knives was carried out in the Balkans, particularly by the Ustaše, the pro-Nazi fascist regime in Croatia during World War II. Between 1941 and 1945, the Ustaše targeted Serbs, Jews, Roma, and political opponents in their puppet state, the independent state of Croatia. Their brutality became infamous even among German and Italian allies, who were shocked by the sheer savagery of the killings. One of the most infamous massacres occurred at the Glina massacre in August 1941, when hundreds of Serbs were rounded up under the pretense of religious conversion. Instead of being converted, they were herded into Orthodox churches and slaughtered with knives, axes, and mallets. Victims were hacked to death in close quarters, their bodies left piled inside or dumped into pits. This was only one of many such killings across villages in Croatia and Bosnia. At the Jasenovac concentration camp, often called the Auschwitz of the Balkans, mass killings were carried out not only by shooting but also with crude weapons. The Ustaše even invented a special curved knife known as the Srbožek, Serb cutter, designed for slitting throats quickly. Guards held competitions to see how many prisoners they could kill in a single night. Survivors recalled that children were murdered by smashing their heads with axes, mallets, or by being thrown into the Sava River. By the end of the war, hundreds of thousands of people, mostly Serbs, along with Jews and Roma, had been killed in the Ustaše's reign of terror. Similar massacres happened in Ukraine and Belarus, where pro-Nazi militias such as the Ukrainian Auxiliary Police and various local collaborators used axes, clubs, and knives to kill Jewish families and suspected partisans. Villages were sometimes wiped out in a single night, with victims herded into barns or houses that were then set on fire. Those who tried to flee were hacked down with blades or bludgeoned with farm tools. These killings reveal an often overlooked aspect of the Holocaust and Axis atrocities. Genocide was not only industrial and distant, but also deeply personal and intimate. Unlike gas chambers or artillery bombardments, massacres with knives and axes required direct, face-to-face violence. They showed how Nazi ideology, mixed with local hatreds, could drive ordinary men into committing the most gruesome acts imaginable. In Eastern Europe, massacres with knives, axes, and blunt weapons became a grim pattern of localized terror that paralleled the larger genocidal operations of the Nazi regime. While the Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing units, often used firearms in mass shootings, Their collaborators in many towns and villages relied on more primitive tools, especially when ammunition was scarce or when killings were designed to humiliate and terrify communities. In Belarus and Ukraine, particularly in 1941-1943, Jewish populations were often annihilated in pogrom-style attacks where pro-Nazi militias and local police forces used axes, knives, and farm implements to kill entire families. Survivors from small shtetls, Jewish villages, recalled seeing their neighbors, sometimes people they had known for generations, storming into homes, dragging victims out and butchering them in public squares. These acts were not only genocidal but also deliberately ritualistic, meant to instill fear and erase the humanity of the victims. One chilling example occurred in Katyn, Belarus in March 1943. While the final act was burning villagers alive inside barns, those who tried to escape were hacked down with axes and knives. The entire population of 149 people, including 75 children, was annihilated. Although German troops led the massacre, local collaborators played a key role in the hands-on killings. In Lithuania, local pro-Nazi collaborators carried out massacres in places like Kaunas and Ponary. While the Ponary massacre is most remembered for mass shootings, survivor accounts also describe instances where victims were killed with axes, knives, and clubs before or after being lined up at pits. The violence was so direct that some killers returned home blood-stained, carrying the very axes they used in the slaughter. The Volhynia Massacres, 1943-1944, in Nazi-occupied Poland, carried out by the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, UPA, also stand as one of the most brutal episodes of close-contact ethnic cleansing. Tens of thousands of Polish civilians were killed in their villages. Survivors testified that attackers frequently used axes, pitchforks, knives, and scythes rather than rifles. Entire families were hacked to death in their homes, often on religious holidays when gatherings were largest. Children were sometimes murdered in front of their parents to maximize terror. These massacres, although not fully under Nazi command, occurred in the same wartime atmosphere of ethnic hatred and collaboration that the German occupation fostered. The thread running through all of these atrocities, from Jedwabne to Jasenovac, from Volhynia to Katyn, was that the massacres were not distant mechanical killings. They were intimate, physical, and personal. Neighbors often slaughtered neighbors face to face with weapons that belonged to farms and households rather than armies. The brutality of axes and knives stripped away any illusion of warfare. It was raw extermination.